Hey everybody, this is Harvey Sunny Wasserman back with you for the 266th Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom calls. Some people have asked if we can change it to or add the term Solartopian Forum to our GREEP moniker, and I'm all for that. Anybody want to write me at Solartopia at Gmail and see if you want to chime in. We add the name Solartopia Forum, which I kind of like. We have an incredible, well, given what's going on in the world, we are reflective of all the insanity out there, except we, of course, are sane. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed person is king, and here we have many of us still have our brain cells, unlike the people who are running our country and our world. So today we're going to welcome a terrific guest, Alexis Goldstein, who was bounced from Doge, and she's got a first-person account of having been axed by Elon Musk. So, Alexis, we look forward to your report, and then we're going to dive into the world of the 2026 elections, starting with gerrymandering, which we may see become the world's history's biggest electoral backfire. We're going to talk about that with the great Greg Palast, who's going to fill us in on election protection and purges and all that great stuff. Greg, of course, was a world-renowned, best-selling investigative reporter. He's going to be joined by the wonderful Ray McClendon from Georgia, who's going to fill us in on all the insanity that's going down there. And our own Mike Hersh has put out a major piece on the number one opponent of American democracy, probably the most effective enemy of American democracy in our history, John Roberts, and the U.S. Supreme Court, which has done its latest damage on the gerrymandering issue, a totally one-sided partisan decision, you could call it, from the Supreme Court. In our second hour, we're going to be joined again by a world-class expert, M.V. Ramana from the University of British Columbia, is going to be filling us in on what's happening with the nuclear power industry and renewables. And we just got a major article out in the internet pointing out that for the first time in history, that right now, as we speak, more energy is being generated and consumed worldwide from renewables than from either nuclear or coal. It's a very big turning point in history, and MV Ramana will be talking with us about that, and he'll be joined by Roger Rappaport, our great investigative reporter from Muskegon, Michigan, who has amazing news about the collapse of Holtec and this insane idea of restarting dead nuclear plants in Western Michigan. And Roger is going to tell us that there are major job openings at Holtec if you all want a $200,000 or $300,000 a year job in the nuclear industry. We're going to tell you how to get it. Meanwhile, Roger is going to fill us in on the collapse of this insane proposed restart in Western Michigan. I think Greg Palast has joined us, and we got 39 people good to go. So we're going to start this amazing gathering with Alexis Goldstein. Alexis, you were an employee of the federal government until Elon Musk came along and got you fired. The question we want to ask is, does Elon Musk love, first and foremost, firing people and putting them out on the street? Or is there some other reason here? But if you will tell us, please, Alexis, about your experience being doged, we'd like to hear it before we go to Greg Palast and Ray McClendon. Please.
Well, thank you, Sunny, and thank you all for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Alexis Goldstein. I, until February of this year, was an employee of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is the agency that was created in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis because the other regulators really did not do a good job for ordinary people. Elon Musk definitely likes firing people. There's a whole playbook that he essentially follows that he followed at Twitter when he took over Twitter. And you can read all about it in a book by Ryan Mack and I think Kay Conger. They're both New York Times reporters, but pretty much everything he did at Twitter, he repeated in the federal government, this sort of like move fast and break things approach. But no, he absolutely loves to fire people. He absolutely does not know what he's doing, whether it be Twitter or the government. Um, but yeah, I'm a rank and file union member at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We are unionized under what is called the National Treasury Employees Union, which unionizes, it's one of the two major federal unions. The other one is AFGE. But we had a pretty strong union, and we basically what happened is Doge had just destroyed USAID, and federal workers were talking and sharing information, and USAID workers actually put together a Google Doc saying, here is the Doge playbook, here's what you should watch out for. And so we were really fortunate at the CFPB to have a bit of a heads up. And so when we, and because we had a strong union and had a strong union for almost the entirety of the CFPB's existence, which is, I always like to say it's younger than Pinterest. It really is not that old of an agency, but we had ways to communicate outside of work systems, and we also had really good relationships with each other. And so essentially we got a tip from someone who was in the IT department that the Doge folks were going to be coming, possibly on the evening of February 6th and definitely on February 7th. And because everyone was scared, right? Like we had just watched USAID be dismantled. Like everyone was worried about what would happen next. The union was really trying to have a strong presence, a strong visible presence. And so one of the things that the union negotiated with the CFPB was things like we can table in the lobby whenever we want, and we can have signage. And so we were trying to be present and visible and there all the time. And on the morning of February 7th, so I have a 3-year-old and I have almost 5 month-year-old, but my 3-year-old, there's no stroller parking at the daycare. So I was always like dropping my kiddo off and then taking my empty stroller to work just to have some place to stow it. So I did that. And on February 7th, I came in with my empty baby carriage, and I saw some people in the basement that I'd never seen before who were accessing CFPB systems. And one of the things that they drill into your head over and over again when you're any government employee, but certainly at the CFPB, is it is all of our responsibility to protect the sensitive information that we safeguard. And that is not just, the very sensitive information of ordinary people who come to us in really vulnerable moments, like if they're facing a foreclosure or if their car has just been repoed. But we also have a lot of essentially trade secrets from American business. So all of the entities that we regulate, which includes the largest banks in the country, the CFPB regulates all banks with $10 billion in assets or more. So all the too big to fail banks to some of these, big tech payment providers. So if you think of like Apple Pay or Google Pay, all of these things that are big tech companies coming into banking. And so I was obviously concerned for two reasons, right? Number one, the American public and all the data that we have, because we have a complaint system. You can always at any time, it's still working because of a lawsuit. We're still alive because of a lawsuit, but consumerfinance.gov/complaint. If you ever have any problems with your financial firm, you can go there and log a complaint. It's obviously not working as well as it would normally, but you can still do it and the record is still there. And that is 100% happening because of the court case that is keeping the CFPB alive. But I had worked in particular on a project investigating big tech and investigating their payment systems like Apple Pay, like Google Pay, like Cash App. And one of the things that they told us over and over again was, this is incredibly sensitive information that you are asking us for. And if this were to appear in the Wall Street Journal, or if this were to leak somewhere, like this is our like trade secrets. And so, I mean, obviously I was mostly concerned with the sensitive data of ordinary people. But I was also very aware that Elon Musk was talking about starting a payment app, an X money payment app. So, what would be the best way to create a monopoly on payment apps is just to go to every financial regulator, get all of the trade secrets of all of your competitors, and you could absolutely undermine all of American industry. And I think I think that is essentially what Doge did all across the government, right? We know they did it at the Social Security Administration. We have a highlight, the National Labor Relations Board had a whistleblower. Like, I think it's pretty clear that they did this all across the board, but that's what I was worried about that day. So I rolled my little empty baby stroller. I put my phone in the juice cup, pointing towards the room they were in, and there was a window in the room so you could kind of see it. So I was just rolling my stroller back and forth, and they saw me. So they moved rooms to a room with no window. And then I was like, well, what do I do now? And I decided to just go say hi to my new colleagues, right? They're in my building. I work here. So I said, hi, what's your name? I hear you're my new coworker. And they were like, we don't have to tell you our name. We're authorized to be here. I was like, great, you're authorized to be here. Tell me your name. Let me see your badge. You seem to have a temporary badge. Anyway, they got very upset. One of them ran out of the room immediately. The other one was Jeremy Lewin, who is one of the people that dismantled USAID, and he went into the corner and sort of scowled at me, but he was like, no, no, this is private. Don't look at my stuff. And they called security, right? And security came and said, will you please leave the room? And I said, of course. And they said, can we see your badge? And I said, of course. And then I asked the security guard, do you know who these gentlemen are? Because I don't. And do you know if they have authorization to be here? And the security guard didn't know what to do. So he just got on the phone and kind of ignored me. And I eventually left the building of my own accord. But later that day, I got an email saying that I was being placed on administrative leave and I was
Oh
not
my God.
returned to the building without permission for the head of security. So all of that was February 7th, 2025.
So this is basically a raid in the private interests of Elon Musk into a federal agency to take data to use to set up private businesses for his personal profit.
I mean, that's my theory. I don't know that we've seen, evidence of that except at Social Security Administration, right? But that was my fear, and that is why I acted. Um,
And then
and
they fired you.
well, they fired all of us actually. What
Oh,
happened is
so that's okay. They didn't
that
just fire you, they fired everybody.
yeah, that same day, Elon Musk tweeted RIP CFPB. They said that they were shutting down the headquarters building and none of the employees were allowed to go to the headquarters building anymore. And then they started by firing the lower hanging fruit, like the probationary employees and what I was, which is called a term employee, which is someone who's on like a set number of years. So they fired all of us on around February, I forget, 11th or so. And then we have these amazing attorneys. They're at this law firm called Group to Wessler. My union, NTEU, brought the lawsuit and hired Group to Wessler. But essentially, they were able to really, really quickly move in court and get the firings undone.
Well,
It did.
you're on the phone, you're on the line here, Alexis, with one of the great reporters in America, GREG
I
PALAST.
see him. I
And
see him.
there's
Yeah.
nobody better that you could be telling this story to, unless maybe it's Sue Dorfman. But Greg, have you heard of this Elon Musk machine gun Kelly purge at the at the federal agencies here?
I've heard of several of the agencies, but I didn't know the particular one at the Treasury. In fact, actually, my sister Gerry Palast was the chief counsel for the National Treasury Employees Union. So
Oh,
I
wow.
certainly
Great.
know your position, your plight. Yeah, I mean, one of the craziest things, by the way, about not crazy, it was deliberate because it's an attempt to just basically cut the guts out of government. With Musk saying, I'm going to give you 6 free months of pay if you step out. Well, anyone who's going to say retire in a year or less is going to take it. People who are experienced. There was no discussion about who do we need. Like when we lost, so we have your agency, But I was actually, you can go to my YouTube site. I have a film called All Washed Away. And one of the things which I originally did for Democracy Now, one of the things is that like FEMA, for example, the people that took the out were done with it, and they so you lost your chief of emergency response in the Southwest. So when they had the flood in Texas, they literally did not have the top guy there whose job it was to coordinate with the Texas agencies. So no one was communicating. So it's the kind of crazy random and in fact, it really hit the most experienced and competent employees, because especially those people who figure they could find something somewhere else. So so I've been looking at the Doge massacre, the kind of public employee pogrom that Elon did.
But and if I hear Alexis correctly, Greg,
Mhm.
this was not a random mass murder. This was a grand larceny. This was more than removing people like Alexis. This was stealing Alexis's Rolodex, basically, and her client list, meaning the American public. This is like not just Elon Musk getting his rocks off by, firing people. It's also stealing the data so that he could set up more private enterprise like PayPal. Is that reasonably accurate, Alexis?
Well, yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alexis.
Oh, yes. I think that, again, that was my fear. We don't have, publicly available evidence that he did that at the CFPB yet. But we know he did something similar at the Social Security Administration. And yeah, he was at PayPal early, but what he's been trying to do now is turn Twitter X into X money. And so that was my fear on that day, is that he was going to raid all of the information actually of PayPal, of Cash App, of Apple Pay, of Google Pay. And he doesn't really seem like he's done anything since that makes me think that he was doing something good with whatever they were trying to get at.
Well, this is a case for Greg Palast, investigative reporter. I mean, really, I had
Oh my God, another
we have
case.
not heard the detail of this theft.
Well,
Greg, I mean,
it's very tempting, because for those who actually follow me, I did win the Global Editors Award for Data Journalism. And I used to be, I had a leg up because I was a professor of statistics. And so I want to tell you one thing I have learned in all the work I've been doing is that data is more important than protein. You are a bag of numbers. Every human being on this may have a face on the screen, but you are a bag of numbers, and they want the numbers. And so they are going to use and what's ugly here, government has a coercive power to get your data. You didn't volunteer it to anyone. And so this involuntarily turned over material, and whatever they have on you that you don't even know about, that's the ugly thing, is that this is a smash and grab. And we know, I mean, as you know, when I started 26 years ago, going after the choice point databases, et cetera, people never thought about doing that, how they were using that to manipulate the voter rolls. But what do you think they've been doing in 25 years? Just sitting on their hands? They're getting better at this. They're getting better.
Alexis, what specifically, Greg says it's a smash and grab. What specifically did they grab?
Well, that I don't know, because they fired all of us, and then we were fired for 6 weeks before they had to rehire us, and even then they didn't really let us do any work. Like, the CFPB has essentially been frozen since February 2025. But I suspect that what we do know from the public domain, right? The information that they took from the Social Security Administration, the information that a whistleblower reported that they took from the National Labor Relations Board. Like, I suspect it's very much, like you said, or maybe Greg said, a smash and grab. And they want to take, I mean, Greg, I appreciate what you said about how the government is this sort of coercive data collector. And that's very true. and it can be used to just exploit all of that data for private ends. I mean, I think there's a long-term project of privatization of government, right? I think that this is a big part of what they have been trying to do and just give away, new business to their crony friends.
Well, what's his name? Musk, along with the horrible Peter Thiel, made their initial fortune with PayPal, manipulating data. I mean, Greg and Alexis together, and you guys got to exchange contacts, please. Alexis, if you're not careful, Greg's going to make you very famous.
Or infamous. That's the problem.
Yeah. So the question is, we're talking about billionaires getting rich on exactly this kind of data manipulation, and you basically got robbed, essentially, right? I mean, you were the caretaker of public data, and they just came in and took it and kicked you out, right?
Yeah, and I think what's particularly sad about it is it's not just me, right? There were, I think at our peak, probably 1,800 people who worked at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's not a huge agency, but it's a lot of really committed people. Like the reason for the CFPB's existence is if banks or financial firms rip you off, we fight to get your money back. And so I think, I am very aware of what happened at the CFPB, but this has been happening all over the government. You have these really committed public servants, right? Like we take this oath of office the first day of our job. Like I, swear or affirm that we will protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And like I was really moved when I took that oath of office. And I think a lot of other people that I've talked to were very moved when they took that. And we take it very seriously. And so not only have we been like, tossed about, fired, unfired, benefits canceled, all of that. But like, we can't do the work that's so important to all of us. And so it's been a real tragedy. But I think the good news is that people have been fighting back, and they've been fighting back from the beginning, and we're getting better at fighting back every day.
Wow.
So that's the good news.
You said you have a 5-month-old child, right? Yeah, you have a young
child.
I do,
yeah.
So that child also is going to be fighting back, right? I mean, what do you say when you say the words Elon Musk to your new baby?
I don't know that I've said it. I have a 3-year-old, and one of the first things I did with my 3-year-old is this was during the student debt cancellation fight, and it was when the student debt cancellation was before the Supreme Court. And so I think Riley was 2 weeks old at that point, and we went to a rally, and I said, Riley, this is the Supreme Court. It's currently an illegitimate institution. But Ray is my new one, and she's certainly been to a few protests, but I haven't told her about Elon yet. You know what? I don't know. It's a little early. I don't want to be a buzzkill.
Well, you got to be careful. Elon's out trying to impregnate the world, so you better stay away from him.
Yeah, I stay far away from him.
Just for the record, I hope you will exchange contacts with GREG PALAST. There's no greater investigative reporter. And you're running for Congress? Is that right, Alexis?
Yeah, so I'm running in the Democratic primary in Maryland, which is where I'm from, in the 6th congressional district. The election is June 23rd. Early voting starts June 11th, and I'm running against a billionaire. His name is David
Who isn't? Who isn't?
And a mega millionaire. Her name is April McLean Delaney, but I am neither of those things. So I just really think the Democratic Party should fight as hard as it possibly can. And both of them are sort of incumbents. They've both had the seat before. And I just think that what we're facing today is so much different than anything we faced before. And Maryland is the state with the largest amount of federal workers who have lost their jobs, 25,000. So I figured I'm challenging them, saying if you want something new and you want someone who's going to throw down, I'm your gal.
Well, we don't endorse and we don't raise money, but you are allowed to put your website up in the chat there.
And Sonny,
Mike,
if I
yes.
could just say a few quick things.
Very quickly, and we have Ray McClendon with us too, Alexis, that you should also know, and that Greg knows very well. Go ahead, Mike.
Absolutely. Well, I was just going to say that Elizabeth Warren wasn't a senator. She wanted to be the head of this commission, and they screwed her out of that. And so she ran for Senate. Now she's been in the Senate ever since. So hopefully this will be a good foreshadowing for Alexis, that they tossed her out of the commission that they hate so much because it's, protecting consumers and investors and making money for the government. And that's, a bunch of things that the right wingers hate, is accountability and efficiency in the government. And hopefully Alexis will springboard into Congress and do all kinds of wonderful things. So,
Well, but as is true of so much with this regime, there's a for-profit motive going on here. I mean, they did not just fire Alexis for ideological reasons. This was as Greg says, a smash and grab, for God's sakes.
well,
And
my
I gotta
case,
say, the most amazing rationale that I have yet heard for the war in Iran is that it is being used by this regime to manipulate the stock market. And whenever the
oh yeah,
president
clearly.
announces a new offensive, they know in advance what the stock market is going to do.
People are tipped off to put their money in the
Right,
futures market depending on what crazy thing Trump is going to say next. And he's
right,
crazy like a fox, and all of his family members and cronies are cashing in at our
right,
expense. And that's one of the things that we need watchdogs to protect against. But,
right.
I was thinking, what if they were to take over the patent office and just grab all the pending patents and say, no, these are ours. This is all
Well, that's
part of
next. That's
Tesla
next.
or
Yeah.
X or whatever. I mean, it's so transparent. And it's like Musk needs more money. I mean,
They
if
Right.
anybody in the
they
world doesn't need more money and
they pro-
probably needs more friends,
Well,
it's Elon
I know,
Musk.
I know what happened in Alexis's case. I'm sure that Musk spread the word that Alexis Goldstein was going to be fired, and the market immediately went down. So,
Well,
that's probably what happened. Everybody sold short. Ray McClendon is with us, and we want Greg and Ray to be on the same. Stay with us, Alexis, and please come back. You're a great guest, and you're the first one that I have heard give a first-person account description of the hijack that was done by Elon Musk in the offices.
can
And
I
I
you
mean,
think
say,
this,
Alexis, can
eh,
you say
yeah,
that it was a military coup in that Peter, or not Peter Thiel's, Eric
no.
Prince's private security blocked entrances to the agencies after Congress had illegally voted on that without the president's veto. So I would think that law would have been in place by Congress, any agency, and that they did it illegally. He can't just go in there and take over the agencies. It was a coup, a
what do you
military
think,
coup.
Alexis?
I mean, they broke so many laws and they continue to break them. It's sort of like add them to the list. But just for one example, the shutdown of CFPB, that is an agency that Congress created, and that's a separation of powers issue. And only Congress can shut an agency down that they created. And that's actually what's at stake at the lawsuit that is keeping the CFPB alive, which is NTEU versus Vote. But they had no concern, I think, for the law. They're, Elon Musk, he's used to treating all of us with scorn because we're not already rich
And
like him.
now they're getting
even though,
ready. They're getting ready to rename the Social Security Agency as Federal Benefit Payments.
Oh, God.
yeah,
Greg
so
Palast.
it's
well,
a
the
mess.
the Trump crime wave continues unabated, and
Yes.
it's
Greg,
up
you
to
want to chime
somebody.
in?
Yeah, I
Exactly
think it's
right.
very,
Greg,
very important. If you didn't get a good intro before I came on, the real crime here, it's horrible what happened to you, Alexis. The real crime here is closing the CPFB. And I will say, I have another connection there. My wife, and I should say my first, a few wives ago, was one of the major lobbyists pushing for this agency because she works at not-for-profit community banks. And this is about stopping bank robbery by the bankers. That's what that agency does. To understand, it's not just a personal tragedy. It's not just the smash and grab for their profits. And by the way, don't dismiss the involvement of Palantir, who's once Trump came in, their stock went up over 1,000%. Why? They're a data company. suddenly we're their mine. We're the data mine. They're going in with their pickaxes coming at us. So,
Unbelievable.
but it's really serious, the closing of the CPFB. And as Alexis says, who the hell is this guy to close an agency voted by Congress? I mean, it is just like, and this reminds me, just like the Supreme Court going into the Voting Rights Act or the 14th Amendment, which was very clear that only Congress could make those rules because they didn't trust the Supreme Court after Dred Scott. Here we have the same thing. An agency was created by Congress because no one trusted this administration or some of the others to actually carry out the law. They could have easily set up an executive agency. Instead, they set up an independent agency. That's very, very important.
Amazing. It's truly amazing. Dave Saltman, Alexis, I'm going to introduce you to another great media maven. This is David Saltman, who has experience with all the major networks. Two-time whatever award it was, David, you ran, I think it was Mr. Universe. Could you speak up? And then I want to go to Ray McClendon.
I just have a question. I missed I know the general outline, but I missed all the details. So I don't think you've answered this though. To what degree, Ms. Goldstein or Goldstein, I'm not sure how to even pronounce your name. Forgive me. To what degree might it be possible to reconstruct this agency outside the government as a nonprofit or something run by Pacifica or what's the one that the Wall Street Journal guy runs?
ProPublica?
ProPublica or something else, and to do that same kind of work. Because, I mean, as somebody who, like you, has spent a lot of time going over the data of the Federal Reserve, that material is all there. It's just waiting for somebody to churn it up or work on it. Is that, and there's some left-wing millionaire like Warren Buffett's children, for example, or Abby Rockefeller or somebody who might be willing to finance something like that.
I mean, if that's all we can get, I think that would be great. I do think it's important to have subpoena power. The CFPB has subpoena power, and also the CFPB enforces 18 different laws that you probably take for granted, like the protections against credit card thievery. Like if you leave your ATM card in an ATM and someone takes it, like it's not a nice thing that the bank lets you call them and they put the money back in your account. That's your right. That's the law.
You could set it up in a state that has open carry.
Salty.
Well, listen, speaking of states with open carry, let's bring in Ray McClendon. It's very important, Alexis, Greg, David, everybody, that we hear from Ray McClendon about what's going on in another state where grand larceny is going on, which is Georgia. Ray, what is the latest on the assault on election protection in the state of Georgia?
Sonny, can we let Alexis go, or do you want her
Well,
to say
no. Well,
word?
Alexis, you're free to go. Unlike whatever. But you may want to hear from Ray McClendon here. Go ahead, Ray.
I'm going to stay as long as I can. My phone is actually about to die, but I will stay as long as I can. Thank you for having me.
Well, you're gonna come back on, and I'm very serious. You and GREG PALAST need to connect here.
I'll make it happen.
The scenario that you laid out, that should be a TV movie, for God's sakes. You know, the visual of Elon Musk breaking in to a banking regulating agency of the federal government, kicking you out and taking the data. I mean, that deserves a TV movie, which GREG PALAST, maybe he can get Bob De Niro to narrate that, or even play the principal, you know, as he could be Don Corleone breaking into the federal agency. But let's hear from Ray McClendon about what's happening in Georgia. Raymond, you want to give us the latest?
The biggest thing that's going on, and first of all, it's great to be with you and be with Greg once again. There is a growing anger particularly in the Black community, with the continued assaults on Black voting rights, from the Fulton County bogus raid that was performed by the FBI. They are now asking for, not only did they steal the ballots, they now want the names of all of the employees and volunteers from Fulton County. So this is a frontal assault where this information is going to be used, no doubt, in our minds in November. But the big item and the anger that's growing more with the population across the South, of course, is the Calais decision and the Supreme Court gutting the Voting Rights Act. This is going to be a big issue. It is creating anger in the community from all places. We could lose half of the Congressional Black Caucus. We could lose half of our Black state legislators when, not if, but when the Georgia legislature decides to redistrict based upon the opening that the Supreme Court has given them. And so the clarion call is going out to try to harness this anger and frustration that is emerging on the assault on the Black community, specifically taking away our voting rights. You know, we were already fighting a bill that's on Governor Kemp's desk right now. Greg probably knows about HB 369, which essentially was a bill that was passed that made the primary positions in 5 counties in Metro Atlanta nonpartisan. Now, guess what? Those 5 counties are predominantly Black, predominantly Democratic, have mostly Black leadership. So they're carving out 5 counties out of 159 counties to make their races nonpartisan. That's just a blatant level of discrimination that goes to the level of how deep the voter suppression is in the South, and how the Supreme Court and others have opened the gates for them to be blatantly racist in the way that voting occurs and the way that maps are drawn.
It's unreal. Well, Greg and I were joking earlier that the greatest enemy of American democracy, and this is nonpartisan, the greatest American enemy of American democracy in its history really has been John Roberts. And nobody's done more damage to American democracy since the Klan, which has never gone away, of course, than John Roberts. And Greg and I were discussing that, which he has said publicly, that John Roberts should trade his black robe for a white one with a hood. And
Absolutely.
and what you're telling us, Ray, is that the damage is tangible already. Greg, do you want to chime in on this?
Well, yes. I mean, understand what's going on here. I would one of the things, well, Ray talked about how you just 5 counties, it's nonpartisan. Understand, because I've written about this thing and similar things where people say they can't just say Black counties. Well, that's never how Jim Crow works. In the case of Atlanta, the 5 counties of Atlanta, plus remember also we also have Chatham County, Savannah, which is a Black county. And what they do is they say any county with 100,000 or more people. And guess what counties have more than 100,000 people? Everyone is a heavily Black population. And so in their laws, they say, okay, this only applies to counties with 100,000 or more. Well, why don't they just say it only applies to counties with a major Black population? It's the same thing. And they did this, by the way, as Ray knows too. They did this with ballot drop boxes. And that's one of the reasons there was the raid on Fulton. Let me circle back to that very quickly, which is that there's no question that Biden and Ossoff and Warnock won in 2020 because you had a massive because it was COVID. So you had a massive drop box balloting. You had 1.1 million drop box votes in Georgia. Then they passed the 100,000 rule. In other words, no black counties, where you can only have one drop box per 100,000 people, but you had to have a minimum. So you have places like Valdosta, the Volusia County, all these little places where they don't even have 20,000 people if you include the cows. They get a drop box for 10,000 voters. Atlanta counties like Fulton get one drop box for 100,000 people. And not only that, they took the drop boxes again, then they changed. Now that's how they figure out how to get to the black counties. But then for everyone, which is bad because they know the black voters rely on early voting and the drop boxes for good reason. I was at, you can go to gregpalast.com to my YouTube site. Same day I go to Atlanta, I'm in Fulton, and it's a 2-hour line, 3-hour line easily. It was insane. Then I go out to Noonan, to the white burbs, and there's no line at all. It's like a 2-minute line. They're just taking down your name and you go right in. So African Americans reasonably say, I can't lose the day. I'm going to, I'll go drop it off. And so they have to stop you from dropping it off. So they said, okay, one of the reason you have Dropbox voting, by the way, is that it's after work hours. So if you're working the post office or something like that, they don't give you time off to vote. Okay. So you go after work or before work. But now they say the drop boxes have to be inside public buildings and are only available during work hours, which defeats the whole damn point. And they're locked inside. So you have to go through security, et cetera, because you're going in a government building. They want to make sure. This is how they do it. They don't say, oh, black voters can't use these boxes. They just know. Jim Crow's always been that way, by the way. Always been that way. It's always
Right.
It's always covered with.
We are going to a
BS.
whole new level of Jim Crow.
Yes.
Right.
And the racism, to Greg's point, has got to be called out for what it is. This is just racism in its rawest form that is being disguised through mechanisms that the mainstream media will not pick up. To Greg's point on the HB 369 legislation, they didn't use population. They used an obscure process where they said, this is criminal justice related. And any county that does not have a coroner will be something. I'm serious. It's in I've read the legislation.
It's brilliant.
It says any county without a coroner is subject to this legislation. Now, guess what? It's only the big metro counties that don't have coroners. Why? Because coroners were an elected position. People didn't have to have, the right backgrounds and the right experience and expertise and medical licenses and so forth. You could be a former security guard and run for coroner and win. Okay. So as the larger counties got bigger and with the complicated, things that coroners have to do in metro counties, they all went to a medical examiner and got rid of the coroner because it was just a deterrent to getting the best process out of that department. So they looked at that as a rationale for saying anybody that does not have a coroner is subject to this law.
Yeah.
And that's the way they got to the 5 metro counties because they do not have coroners, and that's the way the bill is written. So they're saying, oh, well, Well, we're not really being racist. We're not really doing anything but just
Mm.
recognizing that you don't have coroners. But what does having a coroner have to do with having to have a nonpartisan race for DA, county commissioner, or any other county level position? They know that in most and these counties also all have black and most of them have black female heads of those counties.
Mhm.
They
Well,
also, many of them have black DAs. So what they're doing is trying to do what they do with nonpartisan races for judge, where there's no R, there's no D by the name, and you just have to gut think through whether or not you know what that person stands for. This is a way of diluting black power and black votes.
Well, let me go to another Jim Crow state, which is Ohio, and where we were familiar. A lot of this movement started after Greg got it going in Florida in Ohio 2004 with Bob Petrakis. In Ohio, Franklin County, which is Columbus with over 1 million people, had one drop box. 1 million people, one Dropbox, and you really had to work to find it. Mike Hersh, you just put out a piece about this and about what's been done with the gerrymandering in Ohio. Do you want to refer us to your piece and give us a quick summary? We got 71 people with us. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I'd like to call on, yeah, there's the, on ColumbiaFreePress.org, a great journalistic site, non-commercial, non-partisan. And yeah, it occurred to me that Virginia was put in the same place that Ohio was, where a court was telling them they couldn't do what they wanted to do. The difference is that Virginia took the added step of asking its voters what they wanted to do. Ohio did the same thing. Virginia listened to the voters. Ohio Republicans, let's be honest, gave the middle finger to the Ohio Supreme Court, a federal court, and the voters in Ohio. So I think that Virginia should just do what Ohio did, because Virginia has a good reason to do it when Ohio didn't. And I just want to call out something that Greg said. The Republicans, or I shouldn't just say Republicans, let's be nonpartisan about it. The racists, whether they were Democrats or Republicans over the last several, decades, have been scheming to keep people of color from voting. And whether it was grandfather laws, when they said, well, it's not racist, we're just saying if your grandfather didn't vote, neither can you. Well, freed, formerly enslaved people couldn't vote, and their grandfather couldn't vote. And now they're saying that it's not racist, and they having tests for people based on the color of their skin. It's devious, it's diabolical, but it's not unanticipated. And we're nonpartisan here, and we criticize Democrats probably more than Republicans if you counted it all up. And I'm going to criticize Democrats for getting caught flat-footed over and over again, for falling for the same pratfalls like Charlie Brown and Lucy in the football over and over again. And I'm going to challenge Democratic Party officials. Do you even want to win elections? Because it seems to me you're trying to lose. And I even have a reason for it, that it's easier to raise money when Trump's in office or some other right-wingers in office, so you can make sure that you pay, for your yachts or your third or fourth vacation homes. I'm going to call on you. I'm going to call you out and say, if you want to win, then you have to anticipate and counteract this, fight fire with fire, and stand up to this, because, Democrats like to claim, oh, black people should vote for us. Biden said, you ain't black if you don't vote for me. Really? Well, then you give people something to vote for besides this blah, blah, glad handing and
They take the votes for granted,
platitudes.
Mike.
That's been going on for a long
They
time.
take the
And,
votes
and
for granted.
it's black people, women, young people, people struggling, working people, union people. And if you take people for granted, they're not going to show up for you.
Well,
And,
Ray McClendon, and then we'll go to Greg
Well,
Palast.
Sonny, I just
Lynn has,
and then
Lynn
Lynn
has her
Finerman.
hand up.
And Sonny,
Lynn
I
has
just
her
want to
hand
say,
up.
Sonny, I just want to say one more thing. Rahm Emanuel famously said, well, where are they going to go? Where else are they going to go? I'll tell you where we're going to go. We're going to stay home. And that's what happens. And you lose. So unless you want to lose because it's easier for you to raise money and you're mercenaries, you're not partisans, you're not even trying to win. And I'm going to call you up. Prove me wrong. Prove that you
Okay.
want to win. And don't take people's votes for granted, for crying out loud. Thank
Well,
you.
Ray McClendon, you're right in the heart of it. Then we'll go to Greg and Lynn Finerman. So Ray McClendon in Atlanta, what do you say?
No, I'm good. I'll let Lynn talk and Greg.
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right, Lynn, go ahead. Jump in, please. Lynn Finerman.
Yes, hi. And as a matter of fact, dear Ray, I was going to ask you a very specific question. News came out today, I believe, that over 1 million uncounted votes have been found in Georgia. Is there anything that you can tell me about that? And I think it was relevant to the 2024 election.
No, I haven't seen any reporting on that. I would take that reporting with a grain of salt.
Or even a grain of LSD. Greg Palast, what do you want to say to that? And then Lynn Finerman again.
Okay.
Greg?
All right.
Greg, did you take a grain of LSD before today's call? Or?
No comment. Why does your head look like a lizard? But anyway, okay. Okay. Remember we talked about the raid at Fulton County on the offices. What they were doing is that they were taking the mail-in ballots now, which Trump and True the Vote and their cronies said were faked. That Jewish billionaires Zuckerberg and, even though he's a Republican, Zuckerberg and Soros paid $10 each to black men. That's why they had a film called 2,000 Mules. They paid $10 each for every vote cast by 2,000 black men. And they were very clear with black men for stuffing these ballot boxes. And they supposedly showed you the black men sticking these ballots in the ballot box. We looked this up. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, which is very right-wing, very Republican, as Ray could tell you, they ran all over the state. They said every single one of the people that they accused of voting, of stuffing the ballot boxes, every single one was innocent, including there was a Verizon executive who is now sued True the Vote to a fare thee well, and that's why Sinclair stopped producing that. But what happened is they moved in, even after all this has been discovered, they moved in and grabbed the ballots because they want to prove that they were not cast by the voters. And yet not one voter said, oh, someone took my ballot and cast it. Because you can get the listing of your ballots, by the way, to see if it was counted. And no, there was one complaint. The Republican Party, the Republican Secretary of State, the Republican officials went through every one of those ballots. I think twice, Ray, right? And not one was illegal, illicit, not legitimate ballot. And just so you know, if you are watching from California or anywhere else, if you do have a ballot with you, there's a barcode on the outside of your ballot. That's you only. You can't vote someone else's ballot because there's a barcode on that ballot, and then the signature inside has to match the name on that's encoded in the barcode. It's basically impossible to stuff these ballots, but that's the claim, and that's the 1 million ballots that they find. They're always finding more ballots than were actually cast. Isn't that funny, Ray? They find 1 million ballots when 70,000 were cast in those boxes.
Well, it's Jesus voting multiple times. We have Ray Lutz with us. Ray in San Diego, also an expert on the mechanics of voting. Ray, do you want to jump in with Ray McClendon, Greg Palast?
Yeah, I don't know if they saw this, but some other investigators, some like armchair investigators, looked at that 2,000 Mules video first of all, never in the video do they show one person going to 2 drop boxes, which they claim that they go to 2, 5, 10, 30 drop boxes and to put nobody, they don't catch anybody going to even 2. And most of them in the video only put 1 ballot in. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But what they found was the map of supposedly Fulton County is actually the map of Moscow flipped over backwards.
Yes,
And
it's true.
and so the fact that they used a Moscow map flipped over to show where they were, it's just a complete pile of crap. And we always laugh because there was this one scene in this video where they're lined up to the drop box. Some guy has his dog with him, and they leave everybody's face unobscured except for the dog. They obscure the face of the dog. Thought, well, that's really nice for, PETA probably appreciates dog rights.
Well,
What a disaster. So thanks a lot for pointing that out, Greg.
and let me just say that, and Ray Lutz knows much more about this and others about the intricacies of these voting machines and the ballots and so forth than I do. But even with this Republican administration, we've had fairly decent confidence in the count and the ability to audit the counts. We know that the 2020 election, as Greg mentioned, was audited not twice, but 3 times.
3 times.
Okay, it was subject to multiple adjudications in the courts. So we're fairly comfortable with the scrutiny there. What we're not comfortable with is the fact that what is really going on is that they are taking voter suppression to a whole nother level of sophistication. And they are using the alleged voter fraud to gain access to our votes, to insert themselves into the systems through this bogus state election board and their bogus claims. And they are setting themselves up to be able to do the very fraud that they accused other folks of in 2020, they're preparing to do in 2026. That's what we need to focus on. We need to focus on what are they really doing with this data? What are they really trying to accomplish by having this information right now? And who is using it? Is DHS going to have it? Is the remnants of Doge going to have it, similar to what the conversation you just finished up? Are they going to have access to that data? That's the question that we need to be having. That's, to me, where the conspiracy is, that they're going to use that data to infiltrate the 2026 election process and come up with a surprise for us by inserting DHS or ICE or someone else in November. That's the number one concern I have. Number 2 is the big challenge for us from 2024 is because of I'm going to another subject here. We did not vote, we meaning Black voters did not turn out at the same level that they did in 2020. And that was a major problem in why Trump was able to move in Georgia. Now, I don't know what it looked like in other battleground states, but in Georgia, our turnout was down by 1 point to 1.5 points. That's a huge difference when you look at the margins in a state like Georgia. We've got to turn out in record numbers in November if we're going to take control of, see progressive take control of the House of Representatives and stave off these attacks that we're seeing in the courts and having a weak, ineffective Congress.
Well, we're almost at the end of this subject here, but one piece I saw today, which is evoked by Mike Hersh's piece, is just because they're gerrymandering now doesn't necessarily they're going to win. And in fact, gerrymandering is a two-edged sword. And in Texas, for example, the Republicans have assumed in their gerrymandered maps that the Hispanic community is going to vote Republican, which actually may turn out not to be the case. Now they're gerrymandering every state they can. And Mike pointed out that they've ignored two, not one, but two statewide referenda in Ohio. They've ignored the state Supreme Court repeatedly, and they've gerrymandered the heck out of the state, but that doesn't mean that they can't lose. And we'll see what happens. But so now the fallback is to prevent people from voting. And we're certainly, Ray, if you'll keep coming back with us, please.
Sure.
They're certainly doing that in spades in Georgia. Greg and Ray, do you want to have another word here before we go to MV Romana and renewables?
Okay. Very, very quickly. Yes, here's what I'm concerned with ICE and DHS. In the SAVE Act, they want to use what's called the SAFE, that's not the SAVE Act, but SAFE database from DHS, which lists people who have been deported to see if they are still on the voter rolls in Georgia. Georgia's asked for those files. Now, the last time that ever happened was Florida got those files from Obama, the deportation files. And as a result, they removed 179,000 Floridians from the voter rolls, all named, Gutierrez and Rodriguez and Park and Chung. You got, and Jefferson. You understand how it works. Jesse Jackson's.
And Schwartz.
Yeah. And so what's happened is, of the 179,000 people who lost their vote, whose vote was challenged, they got one single alien voter, a Republican from Austria. But in the meantime, tens of thousands of Floridians lost their vote because part of their name was on a deportation file. And so that's what I'm concerned with DHS. And when you talk about data, this is what we're talking about. You are a bag of numbers, and they're looking for the number that'll get you off the voter rolls.
Right. And they're clearly not going to stop with gerrymandering.
No.
Gerrymandering is just the tip of the iceberg here. The real McCoy is elimination of voters, and nobody says that better than Greg and Ray. And Ray Lutz, do you want to jump in before we go to MV Romana?
Well, I just wanted to say that the gerrymandering depends on how people used to vote. In the last election, they use that as their print. But I'm just hoping that people will smarten up for this next election and not vote the same way. And that way it won't go as predicted. Also, regarding the ballot seizure by the FBI, I think this is just to kind of normalize the seizure of ballots. And I'm worried they're going to be doing this at every place that they fall a little bit behind. And they can say, okay, stop the voting. We got to seize the ballots, whatever it is. They did all kinds of stuff in the last election. And so they're taking this to the next level. On the other hand, I see kind of I always like to look at the glass half full. I would rather keep ballots and other evidence of what happened in the election and not destroy it. And so a lot of these counties wanted to just destroy all the evidence at the first time that they can versus keep it for further review. And not that I want to debate about it forever, but there were problems in Fulton. I mean, it wasn't squeaky clean. They had some problems because they had new voting systems. They used to vote on DREs completely, and all of a sudden, they had more things to keep track of. They had paper all of a sudden. They had ballot images to keep track of, and they didn't keep them. So there was some slip ups there by the people just because they started using a new system. But thank God we had the paper. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any recounting or any kind of checks involved. And they would have just said yes, sir, when they asked for 11,780 votes.
So
okay,
Ray,
really
Ray, you need to be in touch, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Ray,
Well, you can call me Raymond, so we don't get too mixed up. Otherwise,
well, we all
Thanks a
know
lot,
that everybody loves Raymond, and everybody loves Ray. We got one more person, a really substantive. Sue Dorfman's a great experts. Sue, do you want to jump in before we go to MV Romana and renewable energy?
Yeah, hi everyone. I just wanted to put in a plug for a photo show. If you happen to be any place in the New York City area the weekend 16th through the 30th, Photoville, which is now in its 15th year, is a mega outdoor photo exhibit. The reason why I'm bringing it up is that for the past several years, I have been going around the country. I've probably traveled about 80,000 miles looking at voting in about 25 states, starting in about 2018. But very quickly, just to say this, these are photos that have been taken over the past several years that look at voting in jails in South Carolina, not a subject most people look at. Looks at people getting out to vote, looks at the work about election workers, looks at being in Selma and what that bridge crossing is all about. And one of the pictures that is almost hard to look at is that the number of people that are in one of the photos of the Black Congressional Caucus, there is a good chance that should all this redistricting take place, as was said, that half of those people will not be there.
Well, listen, okay. Thank you for that, Sue. And if you can put a link to that show, that would be great. Let's finish here with Steve CARUSO, Ray, Raymond, and Greg. If you guys can keep coming back, this is obviously at the heart of the matter here. And we did hear a first-person account of a raid on a government agency, which I did not expect. And we have more to say about that raid in Atlanta and elsewhere. So please come back next week if you can. We're going to go to MV Romana, who looks like he's in a greenhouse. MV, it's great to see you. Steve CARUSO, did you want to jump in? And then we're going to move ahead.
Yeah, Liberty Vote just bought Dominion. They were prior doing poll book. They're a poll book vendor, and we know how sometimes poll books just don't work the way they're supposed to. I'm not casting aspersions here, but like Holtec in charge of a nuclear plant, Holtec never ran one. So here they are running the voting company as a poll vendor, which poll books aren't keeping up to date very well. Thanks.
So, you know, the gerrymandering battle has been one thing, but now it's really counting the vote and getting the vote out. So let's keep this going. Greg, Ray, and Raymond, thank you very, very much. Sue Dorfman, Lynn Feinerman, this was an amazing session, and we will keep repeating it next week. So thank you all for being with us. And we're going to move on now to nuclear power and renewable energy. We're joined by one of the world's leading and most respected experts, Professor MV Romana. Professor, you really do look like I don't see any marijuana plants behind you, but it does look no, but you do look like you're in a greenhouse. You're also joined by Kevin Camps, who's in Western Michigan, and the great investigative reporter Roger Rappaport. We still have 67 people with us. And now, MV, you are going to use slides, but remember, we're on the air, and I'm sure you're more than capable of describing your slides as good enough, well enough for a radio audience. And we want to jump in. You're an expert on nuclear power, the state of the nuclear industry. You're very widely published. It's really an honor to have you on with Kevin Camps. And Roger Rappaport is going to give us the latest update with Kevin on the insane attempt to restart the Palisades reactor. And we're also going to try and use your segment, Professor, for our Solartopia show, which airs on the Pacifica Network. So we're going to keep it tight, and we'll be using your transcript as well as your audio. So MV Romana, welcome to Solartopia and to a general discussion on the solution of what we're going to do with our energy. Nuclear is not the solution, is the title of one of your books, The Folly of Atomic Power in the Age of Climate Change. MV Romana, you're at the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada, which to my understanding is still an independent country. And we're really honored to have you with us. So please tell us about the fall of nuclear power, if you would, and the rise of renewable energy.
Thank you. It's a real honor to be with all of you, Sunny, and thank you for the invitation and thank you all for joining. I'll be brief. There's a lot of talk about new nuclear reactors being built and expansion of nuclear power and so on and so forth. And I'm just going to offer a kind of reality check, looking at the data and seeing where we are. So if you look at the number of the reactors that have been connected to the grid around the world, the reactors have been connected since the 1950s. And the numbers of reactors that have been connected every year is shown in this graph. And what you see are there are some years when there are lots of reactors that have been connected to the grid, and some years when many reactors have been taken off the grid, they have been shut down. And the best part, or the most of these nuclear reactor constructions and connections to the grid all ended in the mid 1980s. The maximum number of reactors that ever were connected to the grid were in the years 1984 and 1985, when roughly about little over 30 reactors were connected each of those years. Since then, the numbers of reactors have fallen dramatically, and there have been many, many years when more reactors have been shut down. The result is that the number of the fleet of reactors operating around the world has been more or less constant since the 1990s. And as a result, if you look at the share of all the electricity flowing in the grids around the world, the share coming from nuclear power plants has been declining consistently since the mid 1990s. The maximum it ever was in 1996, when it was 17.5%. And in 2024, the last year for which we have consistent data, that fraction has fallen to around 9%. The data for 2025 is not yet out, but it's very likely to be roughly in the same range.
So you're
Because it's
saying,
all very-
Professor, you're saying that the percentage of global electrical supply from nuclear power has basically fallen in half since the
That's right.
1990s.
Exactly. And this, I mean, this is the all electrical energy rather than electrical energy capacity. And it's what is flowing in the grid. So this does not include any source of power that's not connected to the grid. So if somebody has a rooftop solar power on their roof and is not connected to the grid, then this is not counting all that. So in actual fact, the real amount of electricity around the world will be even slightly smaller than 9%. Okay? In
Well,
contrast,
there are no nuclear power plants operating in the world that are not connected to the grid. Is that
that's
true?
correct. That's right. So I'm talking about non-nuclear sources typically, which are not connected to the grid. That's not captured here. And in contrast, if you look at modern renewables, solar and wind and biomass and things of that sort, that fraction has increased dramatically in the last 2 decades, and is again in 2024, the figure was 17.3%. Again, this does not include any electricity that is not flowing into the grid. So it's all percentages of the grid.
Well, that's amazing. So basically, in the last 30 years, the percentage of global electricity on the grid produced by nuclear power plants has fallen in half.
That's
And
right.
the percentage of electricity on the grid produced by renewables is now double what's coming from nuclear power. Is that correct?
Exactly. Exactly. Okay.
Mind-boggling. That's
And
amazing.
yeah, and as I said, these are figures for 2024. For 2025, I'm sure the numbers will be even higher from renewables. So it will be more than double. And the second thing to note is that if, we talk a lot about, or we hear talk of nuclear power being a solution to climate change, had it really been a solution to climate change, what you should be seeing is that the fraction of electricity from nuclear power plants should be increasing, and the fraction from fossil fuels should be declining. That's not happening here, right? So that's one indication that it is not. Why is this? Why do we have this trend? The simple answer is that nuclear power is just not economically competitive. And that in turn is because nuclear reactors cost too much to build. I mean, you all know the numbers. For example, the Vogel reactor cost something like $37 billion. And similarly, story in France, the Flamanville reactor cost about $17 billion. The UK is building 2 reactors, which are estimated to cost over $50 billion.
Jeez.
And so, so 2 things to remember here. One is that these are all experiences in countries that have had many, many decades of experience with building nuclear plants. And the second thing is that these are the most expensive power plants ever built in those countries. So this is not like they are starting something new. This is not like they don't have experience. And yet these have been the most expensive nuclear reactors. Okay. And the Vogel, when these reactors were sort of commissioned, the expectation was that they were going to be much cheaper. So if you look at the Vogel reactors in Georgia, the final price was around $37 billion. But when construction started, that price was estimated to be about 14 billion. So it's more than 2.5 times what was expected at that time. Okay. But that $14 billion is not the whole story. When planning for the Vogel project started, it was as part of the wave of nuclear reactor orders that came in the aftermath of the 2005 Energy Policy Act that was legislated by the George Bush administration. At that time, some of you might remember there was a lot of talk about a nuclear renaissance, and I'll talk about that later. But that talk was partly because companies like Westinghouse, the company that designed the reactors that were built in Georgia, they were estimating that it will be $5 to $6 billion for building these 2 reactors. So from that figure, it went up to 14, then that went up to $37 billion. Okay. This is very much par for the pattern of cost and time estimates, estimates being much lower than what is the final cost and time that it takes to build a nuclear reactor. One academic study looked at 180 different nuclear reactor projects around the world and found that 175 of them had exceeded their budget, and they all had cost overruns over 100% and took about 64% more time than was projected. Okay.
So you're saying that essentially not more than 90% of the reactors that were undertaken came in at double their original cost? Is that essentially what you're saying?
That's more, yes. That is what the study showed, but it was a study of only 180 projects. That's not all the nuclear reactors around the world. They didn't have data on many nuclear reactors, but of the ones that they examined, over 90% were more than double.
Oh my God. And how
But
much
what's also
longer?
interesting is that the latest set of reactors that have been built, whether it's in the United States or in France, have been much more extreme than these cost overruns. Okay?
So we have a negative learning curve here, right?
That's right. I'll come exactly to that. Give me a minute. Okay. So the other thing, and why is so if nuclear power is so expensive, it might be okay if other sources of power are more expensive as well. But what we have seen in the same period when the share of nuclear power was declining was a dramatic drop in the cost of solar and wind power that your audience knows only too well. And so if you look at the cost estimates of a new nuclear plant being built in the United States, and you compare that with a new solar utility scale plant or a wind plant, the costs of power are roughly about 3 times per megawatt hour from a nuclear reactor as compared to solar or wind.
Wait a minute. You said three times as expensive for nuclear as for solar or wind?
That's correct.
300%.
This is the estimate
300%. 300%?
Yeah, so $180 per megawatt hour for a nuclear power plant, and maybe something around the order of $60 per megawatt hour for a solar utility scale or wind. This is the average across all solar and wind plants in the United States. So there's going to be a considerable amount of variation. There are going to be plants which are going to be much cheaper in their construction cost and how much they are going to be charging for the electricity, and there are going to be some that are much more expensive. And so the average is what we are talking about.
That is mine, but why would anybody on this earth build a new nuclear plant that's going to come in 300% more expensive than solar or wind?
Well, the answer is that they have a very good incentive, or utility companies have a very good incentive to do so if they can pass on the costs to the consumers. And this is what happened in the states of Georgia and South Carolina, where they were built, because the companies were, and I can show you figures of how their profits were rising even as all the costs were being transferred to the consumers. And this was what the Georgia and the South Carolina legislatures allowed them to do, right? And so that's what they really depend on when they're going to build a new nuclear plant. If you have one of those, if you're in one of those states where the nuclear sector is deregulated, then the only way by which these companies might build one of these is if the state really subsidizes them and gives them a whole bunch of incentives.
Well, let's take, okay, you've been talking about Georgia. Let's talk about South Carolina.
Yeah.
The VC summer reactors
Yeah.
were, I don't know what they were originally scheduled for, but they, at $9 billion,
Yeah.
they abandoned them.
Exactly.
And so while VC summer, Vodal in Georgia will, I guess, allegedly produce some electricity, and there can be a cost analysis. VC summer, they spent $9 billion. They dug giant holes in the ground, and then they abandoned the reactors. So there will be zero electricity produced in exchange for the $9 billion at VC Summer. How does that fit into your calculations?
That fits in perfectly well. That's exactly the story where the people in South Carolina are still paying for electricity they never received. Okay. And this model was adopted by the UK. The UK, when it was incentivizing EDF to build the Hinkley Point reactors, what they offered them was that they would pay 92.5 pounds per megawatt hour, which is roughly double what the going rate for electricity for in the UK was at the time when the contract was struck. But EDF has not managed to get any money out of this because they have not yet built the reactor. They have not sold any electricity. As a result, when the next planned nuclear reactor in the UK was being discussed, namely Sizewell C, what the UK government has basically said is we're going to borrow the same idea that was done in South Carolina and Georgia. And they call it the regulated asset base model. And so it's for companies which are in the business of building nuclear plants. This is a great deal as long as they can figure out how to pass on the costs, right? That's what it is all about. Okay, let me move on. Just a quick thing to say, one of the standard arguments you would hear from people when they are being told that nuclear power plants are expensive is that don't worry about this. There are going to be new nuclear reactor designs. Usually they'll call them small modular reactor designs. And that's going to change this picture completely, right? And for
Right. So
example,
small reactors now are the big deal. And so that's what they're all saying. The industry is saying they're not going to build any more big reactors. They're going to try and restart small reactors, the old reactors, but the small ones are the cat's meow. And that's what we want to hear from you now, MV Ramana. You're really great here. So give us the numbers now on small reactors.
Sure. I'll just not talk so much about the numbers on small reactors as much as what are the essential features. And the claim from small modular reactor vendors is that somehow because of their modularity and so on, they are going to change the game and make it cheaper, right? So let me just say one word about what small modular reactors are. There are two terms here, small and modular, right? The small just means that the power that it will produce will be less than 300 megawatts of electricity. In comparison, each of the reactors at Vogel produce about 1100 megawatts of electricity. So this is about a quarter of the capacity, of the power capacity of the large reactors, okay? It has nothing to do with the physical size of the reactor. The physical size of a small modular reactor can be quite large, but it depends very sensitively on what kind of design we are talking about. So this graph that I have here, which shows a different set of numbers, are one measure of the size of a nuclear reactor. And you see that some designs are much larger and some designs are much smaller. The other term we have is called modular. Modular just means that instead of building the whole reactor on site, what you would do is to manufacture parts of it in a factory. These are called modules, and these modules are brought together to this factory site and assembled at the reactor site. And it's sort of like a Lego blocks, if you like, right? And this is the way all construction happens today. If you think about a shopping center that's being built or an office building that's being built, we don't bring bricks and wood and carpenters to the site. Much of this is made in factories. Things are just kind of brought to the site and assembled together. It's the same idea here as well. And large reactors and small reactors can be both modularly built. In fact, the Vogel reactor was a modular design, and Westinghouse made a big deal about it and said, that's why we're going to be able to bring down the costs. Okay? But when you look at all of these nuclear reactors, should I stop for questions?
No, keep going, please, because,
Okay.
in our world, the S and the M in small modular reactors actually stands for silly and mythological. And what they're saying is that they're going to build these small reactors by 2030. But they're already 2 and 3 times as expensive
That's right.
as solar
I'm
and
just
wind.
coming
Is
to
that
that.
true?
Yeah, I'm just coming to explain why that is. So the thing to remember about nuclear reactors is that anybody who's designing a nuclear reactor will be interested in a number of different properties, right? You would like them to be having a lower chance of an accident. You'd like them to produce less nuclear radioactive waste. You would like them to be less proliferation prone, and you'd like them to be less expensive. My former colleague Zia Mian and I looked at a number of small modular reactor designs, and what we found was that no single design can have all these properties. Namely, they can't be safer and produce less waste and be more proliferation resistant and be cheaper, right? They're going to have to make some design choices, and every design choice will make some properties better and some properties worse. In particular, when you go to small reactors, they are going to be more expensive per unit of capacity as compared to a large reactor, right? This is called, this is a well-known principle in industrial engineering. It's called economies of scale. And what it means is that why that is the case is because if you were to think about a 1000 megawatt reactor and a 200 megawatt reactor, the 1000 megawatt reactor does not need 5 times as much concrete or 5 times as many workers as a 200 megawatt reactor, right? So the per megawatt cost of a 1000 megawatt reactor is going to be much lower than the per megawatt cost of a 200 megawatt reactor. And likewise, these things will also produce more spent fuel and waste as compared to a larger reactor per unit of electricity generated. And we see this in the data that we have so far. If you look at the NuScale design that was proposed for a project in Idaho, the UAMPS project, the cost of that turned out to be over $20,000 per kilowatt. That's more than the Vogel cost, even the final after the $37 billion. But the right point to compare this is with Vogel when the construction started, it was estimated $14 billion. So if you compare the $9.3 billion that was the final cost estimate for NuScale, and you compare that with Vogel's $14 billion cost estimate, and you do the math, you'll find that this is about 250% more than Vogel as of 2014. And we see this in a number of other places as well.
And how does that compare to renewables?
Well, so the thing to remember is the figure that I showed earlier with the cost as estimated by Lazard showed that, for the Vogel type reactor, a large reactor, the cost is about $180 per megawatt hour in comparison to about $60 per megawatt hour for solar or wind. And so if you do that comparison and you note that small modular reactors are going to be greater per megawatt of cost, the cost of electricity from a small modular reactor, therefore, will be even higher than a large reactor like Vogel, right? So you're talking about maybe 4 times that of renewables. Okay. We don't have any final
Wait.
cost
You're
figures
saying
yet.
that a small reactor is going to cost 4 times as much as renewable in cost per kilowatt hour? Four
Yes,
times?
probably something like that.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What,
So
what,
we
what,
don't
what?
know exactly what it's going to cost from a small modular reactor because we don't have any operating reactors, right? So we don't know what the final cost is going to be, right?
Well, we've already had your colleague at the University of British Columbia, Alison McFarlane, a former chair of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, warning that small reactors will produce more radiation per kilowatt, more radioactive waste per kilowatt hour than regular reactors. Is that true?
That is true. That's for a very simple reason. When you have a smaller reactor, there's going to be more amount of neutrons that are going to escape from the surface. And if you want to use some kind of blanket element to absorb all those neutrons, those things will all become radioactive and you're going to be producing waste there. You're also going to be using more fuel per kilowatt hour. Therefore, you'll be producing more spent fuel. So a number of reasons why small reactors, all else being equal, a smaller reactor will produce more waste. Okay.
So basically, then, what we have here is a great deal offering to the world public, which is small reactors, which will cost 400% per kilowatt hour what renewables will cost, and will produce more radioactive waste than the previous generation of nuclear plants per kilowatt hour. Is that correct?
Something like that. I mean, I'm not going to hold you to the 400% because that really depends on the experience, and we don't have experience. So, there's always been a big mismatch between what the nuclear industry claims the cost is going to be and what is going to be the final cost. So, let's not jump to a number, but we can just be very clear that's going to be much more expensive. Okay.
Is there any chance that small reactors will come in cheaper than renewables?
No. No,
You're,
that's it.
you're sure about it? You kind of waffled on that.
No, I'm not waffling. I'm saying no very clearly for that, right? I
Okay.
just don't want to put a number there because we don't have numbers.
So we're being offered here. Well, first of all, the small reactors are coming in line after the alleged restarts, and we're hearing horrendous nightmares about the restarts, including, of course, Palisades in Michigan, which Kevin Camps and Roger Rappaport are experts on. But you're saying there's no chance that small reactors will come in cheaper than renewables. We know that small reactors will not be coming online in any quantity before 2030. And you're also saying that they will produce more radioactive waste per kilowatt hour than large reactors. Is that true?
That's correct.
So why in God's name is anybody talking about building small reactors?
Well, some companies clearly are trying to make money off this, right? And well, there's a lot of other stories here about why some of these big tech companies are talking about this, which has a lot to do with their public relations benefits. They don't want to be seen as sources of large amounts of emissions from their data centers. And so they like to say, oh, don't worry about it. We are going to build all these small modular reactors, right? So it's a good talking point for them. And so the number of groups for him, it's in their interest to talk about small modular reactors. The public is not among them. For the public, this is a bad idea.
Well, it strikes me as not only bad, but flat out insane. MV Ramana, you are really gracious to be with us. It's tremendous to have you as a guest. And from the University of British Columbia, is there anything you would like to add about why small reactors make no sense and why they're being pushed simultaneously?
Well, they don't make sense for all the reasons we have talked about. They're going to be more expensive. They're probably going to produce more waste. They also can have accidents because they have all of the characteristics of a large nuclear plant, except they have smaller amounts of radioactive materials, but you can still spew out large amounts of radioactive materials in the event of a catastrophic accident. And if you were to think about nuclear power as a solution to climate change, you have to build these by the thousands before it can make any sizable impact on our emissions. And that's not going to happen anytime soon. So it's It's really a distraction from the urgent task of dealing with climate change, small modular reactors. But in the meanwhile, there are lots of companies that are making like bandits because they try to take public money in exchange for, you know, a bunch of PowerPoint designs and fancy looking computer simulations and animations.
MV Ramana, it's been an honor to have you with us on the California Solartopia and the Solartopia broadcast of the Pacifica Radio Network and elsewhere. And I hope you'll stay with us. I mean, your presentation is absolutely devastating. And we're lined up now. We have two great experts in Michigan, Roger Rappaport and Kevin Camps. Kevin is in Kalamazoo, and Roger is a great investigative reporter who's been digging deep into what's happening with Holtec at the alleged Palisades restart. We're going to give Roger 10 solid minutes here to explain. And MV Ramana, I hope you'll stay with us because Roger is one of the great investigative reporters, and he's going to give us a lowdown here that nobody else has.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing you, Roger.
Roger Rappaport, you're on the west coast of Michigan. You've been following, along with Kevin Camps and others, the debacle at the Holtec attempt to restart the zombie Palisades reactor. What's the latest?
Well, this is Kevin Camps, Dave. Kevin, it's finally happened, and congratulations. So here's what's happening at Holtec. For those of you who aren't up to speed, Holtec was the company that was brought in 4 years ago to dismantle something they know how to do, take down decommission a nuclear reactor, and they were given a great deal of money for that. And then they decided that at the request of Governor Whitmer, with further help from the Biden administration, Jennifer Granholm, her predecessor, who was the head of Department of Energy, and finally, of course, the Trump administration. They may disagree about a lot of things, but one thing they don't disagree about was the need for commercial nuclear power. So at Whitmer's suggestion, Holtec, which had never built or operated a nuclear power plant, agreed to stop dismantling the plant, which they had a right to do under a contract with our government. And they went ahead without any kind of license whatsoever and began to prepare the plant for operation. Originally, when they first began doing this 4 years ago, there was a target date of 2 years ago. Next month will be 24 months since the original date. More recently, they've been talking about last fall, they actually got an operating license, which meant that beginning in the summer of last year, they actually had the legal authority to operate the plant, not dismantle it or decommission it. So at that point, they were going to operate in the fall. They were going to do a $10 billion IPO. They also got more money to start on construction of 2 SMRs, which we've just heard about. And again, they've never built an SMR either. Okay. Well, here's what actually happened. We're now down the line, as Kevin can give you the real numbers, but I'm going to give you a quick overview. We're at about the $3 billion mark. Kevin's outside number could be up to 16 billion by the time everything happens. And you've heard some of the inflationary numbers that Professor Ramana has been talking about. Great book, by the way. I loved it. Really, everybody in this conference, if you haven't read his book, I urge you to do so. So right now, they're up to about the $3 billion mark. They got over $1 billion in a loan and lots of other money. There's subsidy for buying the electricity. There's only one problem. The plant isn't operating. So this plant that was supposed to supply energy, get this, for 800,000 homes, hasn't produced a single kilowatt for anybody. And guess what? The CEO of Holtec International is gone. He disappeared last month, and he's just no longer there. This is the guy who was running the project. Now, we can go on and on and on about all the things that have gone wrong at the attempt to make this the first historic restart. And if you go on Indeed.com, as I just did, you will read that you can get, depending on your level of training, between 100 to 150 to $225,000 for going to work at this noble enterprise that they have decided is going to become the first ever nuclear power plant. They're making history, they sure are, but not in the way they thought. At the moment, there are 47, I'm not making this up, major jobs that are now available to go to work at Holtec. And listen to this: manager of training, 145,000 to 218,000; licensing engineer 3, senior valve engineer, simulator specialist, senior radiological specialist, exam writer, maintenance specialist, senior nuclear radiation shielding engineer, simulator design, supply chain, senior outage scheduler, nuclear systems engineer. Everything from security. These are not janitorial jobs. These are critical reactor safety jobs. So you might ask yourself, why on earth would anyone not want to go to work in beautiful Covert Township, Michigan, where they would have an opportunity to make an incredible amount of money for this wonderful company? And I urge you, when you're on the Indeed.com site, just log in and start reading some of the reviews of this company. You will be astounded. I think out of 5, they have a 2.4 rating. Christian Singh, the CEO and founder, I think his rating is about 35%. Overtime, unpaid, talking about weekend work. One person said, well, if you don't want to see much of your family, great place to work for. Toxic work environment. So here's the question. If the CEO of Holtec International, the guy running this project, disappeared and quit immediately, and he was hired 4 years ago because he had the perfect resume on building big power plants, is gone, and they have all these job openings, including safety, security, outage, and so forth, you might ask yourself, would you really want to work there? Now, keep in mind that when people are looking at these jobs, they call around and they talk to friends. It's a small industry, really. And obviously the word is out that number 1, the plan is behind schedule. Number 2, the IPO didn't happen. Number 3, the CEO just quit. Number 4, they've got welding issues, and their own consultants, as Kevin and Arnie and others have pointed out in his team, they've conceded that this plant cannot operate on a normal cycle. And I just want to point out to you that this loan that they took out, which they're presumably repaying, this is a company, Holtec organizes in a way that basically compartmentalizes, which means that if the plant never opens, who is going to repay this loan? Or if they do reopen it and it has to keep shutting down because of all these projected safety challenges, which their own consultants have predicted. In other words, it can't run the normal 18-month operating cycle because there's too much of a probability that something's going to go wrong. So suddenly this cheap solution for supposedly clean energy and providing energy for 800,000 homes that Michigan and all of us as taxpayers are on the line for is looking dimmer and dimmer. And this underscores what Professor Rama and what Kevin have been saying all along. This entire project, and there's never been a better example, is the perfect example of what happens when you buy off congressmen and legislators. And I want to give you this very simple example. I have a congressman, a state legislator in my district. He lives around the corner from me. He's a good guy. And I have attempted for the last 5 months to sit down with him to have the same conversation that Professor Ramana and Kevin and you, Harvey, have been talking about, just to simply go over this. And the last time I saw him, he said, we just passed another bill to give them another 150 million. So why on earth would a smart, responsible legislator want to keep giving money to a company that can't even get a plant open? And now they're trying to build new plants that obviously, as Professor Marana has pointed out, are going to be wildly over cost, not even close to solar. We have a president who's actually trying to reopen a coal plant, which they may need to supplement the power that they're not, because they've killed wind and solar projects all over. And they're going to have to go to coal to find the energy for these 800,000 homes, at great expense and on top of the environmental solution. So I think the question that everybody in this room needs to ask is, why is your congressman, why is your senator, why is your state legislator? Why, I really realize, Kevin, you have some officials in Kalamazoo who are on the right side, but I'm talking about the congressman in the district where it is, the mayor of South Haven and so forth. Why would any of these people want to see the utility rates for their neighbors go up? And why would they want to vote for political people who won't even meet with their constituents to talk about this boondoggle? And the answer is obvious. They're paying off both sides. They're contributing to campaigns for everybody. This is why the New York legislature, the Illinois legislature, Carvey, we've talked endlessly about what's happening in California. It's because they're paying the bill for these campaigns. And if they don't take the money, the other side, the candidate they're running against, is going to take it. And there you go. So the question is, politically, the facts are indisputable. It is not clean energy. Everybody knows that. It's been fully documented that it's not carbon free, and Holtec is the perfect example of what we're talking about. I mean, ultimately their failure, because they're killing, by the way, there was one piece of good news. We did have the appeals court in Michigan yesterday basically said that local governments can't just kill solar, offhandedly. They have to, the state now has the power to push licensing. You can't just, as a township, say, no, we're not going to have a solar farm. That's not working anymore. So that's a piece of good news. But the bad news is that solar's been kneecapped. Wind power has been kneecapped. So when Holtec fails and they need more power after all these subsidies and everything else, they're going to have to go to coal. I mean, it is mind-boggling. And Kevin can document everything I've just said. There isn't a single fact, but the most demonstrable evidence of all is the fact that the CEO, the guy running the Holtec start for the last 4 years, who's been with them, for quite a long time, is one of the top guys in the field, quit.
Well, thankfully we have Kevin Camps in Kalamazoo. Kevin, you could just go up the road to Palisades and apply for that job. And, I'm here in New Jersey. Greg Palast's going to come visit me soon. We can go into Camden and put in applications there. And MV Ramana, there's nobody better qualified to run an energy company than you. Maybe you should send in your resume to Holtec. Kevin Camps, what do you think about all this right there in Kalamazoo?
Well, it's an honor to speak after Roger and Dr. Ramana. Roger, you made a lot of good points. Our read of the tea leaves on the major reshuffling at the senior executive level at Holtec is that it's another indication that they're moving closer to their initial public offering. Since the mid-1980s, the founder, CEO, and chairman of Holtec, Krishna Singh, is the sole owner of Holtec. And now they're moving for an initial public offering. They're trying to raise $10 billion of private funding, private capital, to put into their deployment of small modular reactors, the SMR 300s, not just at Palisades, not just up north at Big Rock Point, but across the United States and around the world. So that figure that you quoted, more than $3 billion, $3.12 billion thus far just for the restart at Palisades, mostly federal money, Department of Energy, Department of Agriculture, $300 million of state of Michigan grants, and then another $400 million more recently last December for the SMR 300 new builds at Palisades. They want to build 2 of them there on this tiny site right next to the 800 megawatt Zombie that's 60 years old. It was designed in the mid-1960s, which is a part of the problem. So a loud rumor, I think I shared a little bit about this recently, either on the radio show or on the Zoom, that we're hearing is that the restart is going to be further delayed. Roger mentioned it's already 2 years behind schedule. Could be many more months before restart. And here's the kicker: if restart happens at all. Although they followed up quickly this loud rumor saying the SMR 300s are full steam ahead at Palisades. So, the first casualty of war is the truth. Holtec lied big time to get a hold of Palisades in the first place. They said they were going to decommission it, they were going to dismantle the facilities, clean up the radioactive contamination, manage the highly radioactive wastes. That was all a lie. A week after they got a hold of it, under that lie, that con job, that bait and switch trick, they sent a proposal to the Department of Energy for the restart, and they talked a whole lot about small modular reactors as well. In fact, a couple months earlier than that, they had said it out loud publicly. Krishna Singh said, "Why don't we just build some small modular reactors there?" And Governor Whitmer said, "Why don't we just keep operating the old reactor there?" So we had a couple months notice, then they applied in secret to DOE, and it wasn't until about 3 months after that that they finally went public and said, "We're going to restart it. We're going to build SMRs. And which company is going to do the restart? Holtec, which has never operated a reactor. They were looking for somebody else to do it. Nobody's that crazy." And I'll just end here by saying the reason that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the Department of Energy, under Biden, but now big time under Trump, like Holtec so much is because Holtec will say yes to anything as long as they're making a killing. And that's exactly what's going on at Palisades. If they get everything they've asked for, that's where that grand total 16 billion with a B dollar figure in public funding just at the Palisades site comes from, is I just added up all of Holtec's requests. And so they're well along the way. They're about 20% along the way to getting all that money. So, and then combine that with the perfect storm of regulatory freefall without a parachute under the Trump Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And we're in serious trouble if they ever do restart the old reactor, but we're also in trouble if they start up the small modular reactors, which are not even design certified. Holtec's never built a reactor, as Roger said. And by the way, there are things called break-in phase nuclear accidents, bugs in the system, design flaws, operator inexperience. And a couple examples of that would be Chernobyl Unit 4 was a brand new reactor when it exploded and burned. 3 Mile Island Unit 2 was a brand new reactor when it had a 50% meltdown. Fermi Unit 1 in southeastern Michigan, this October will be the 60th anniversary of the partial core meltdown. That was a brand new reactor. So brand new reactors are dangerous in and of themselves.
Well, I want to point out that Roger and I were both editors of the University of Michigan Daily in Ann Arbor in October of 1966 when Fermi almost killed us both. So there you go. MV Ramana, after hearing this, are you going to be putting in your application to become the new CEO of Holtec here? What's the story?
I don't think they just have to look me up on the internet, and they will. Even the AI systems will sort of cut me out in the very beginning.
Well, in your history of atomic reactors, where does Rogers pointing out here of this mass exodus of skilled positions at a nuclear facility? What does that tell us?
Yeah, I think it tells us, some of these nuclear companies are, and Holtec is a great example of a company that really is not a great place to work in. So one can imagine there are lots of people who are going to be leaving after just a little bit of working for a little while in these places, right? And if it's a company that really has to nickel and dime and cut as many costs as possible, it's also not a safe place for people to work in.
Well, this is all quite amazing. What would your prediction be, MV Ramana, on the future of the restart at Palisades, and how do you see this fitting in to the general attempt to restart like 3 Mile Island and Duane Arnold, and in light of what's happening at Palisades and what is also happening with small modular reactors?
Yeah. I mean, Kevin is much better placed to sort of predict what might happen at Palisades. It's a nightmare really to think of Holtec, which is absolutely it's not just the fact that Holtec has no experience, but they started this company they set up this facility in Camden, got a whole bunch of money from New Jersey. That's when I used to be still in Princeton. And they were found sort of guilty of all kinds of things, and they had to apologize for various things they had not divulged in their petition and so on. So Holtec is not a company we should be trusting to be running a nuclear plant, especially a nuclear plant that's had this very long history of problematic operations, and that's so old at this point.
Well, speaking of problematic operations, I want to call on Ray Lutz real quickly. Ray Lutz was instrumental in the successful retirement of the reactor at the two reactors at San Onofre in California, which had many of the same structural problems as Palisades. And I want you to be in touch with Kevin and with MV Romana here and Roger Rappaport. Raymond, do you want to kick in some of your experience at San Onofre here as it may pertain to Palisades?
Yeah, hopefully you can hear. Oh, there we go. Yes, well, again, this was where they had brand new steam generators. This was not it was an older plant. It was supposed to be shut down, and they said, well, we need to replace these steam generators to extend its life. And they went into the process of cutting a hole in the containment domes, taking the old steam generators out and having them replaced with so-called like for like comparisons. But if you actually read the engineers' documents about this, there's all kinds of changes to them. Yeah, it's like a light bulb that goes into the same socket, but it's a completely different shape and everything else. So this accident occurred not because of any kind of terrorist attack or tsunami or earthquake or anything, because there's a lot of threats like that right around this plant. No, this was because of a design mistake that started them rattling apart, and they started a leak within 11 months. Fortunately, they were able to shut the plant down safely. And then the big challenge was to get them to not start it up again. And this was the same kind of debate that we're in now over there in Michigan, which my wife happens to live there. So I'm probably going to be coming out to visit you guys. I did go by the reactor, the plant when I was there. I don't like to get too close to these plants.
Right.
So
well, we did notice you went to Michigan once and you glowed on the screen there.
Yeah,
So.
well, we had a couple of big rallies at San Onofre, and we tried to do them sort of secretly, but then they called me and said, yeah, I'm the security for San Onofre, and we happen to know that you're going to plan to do a rally there. We want to help you find a place.
Right.
They gave us a place, right? It turns out where they have the emitters for extra radioactivity coming out of the plant. I had cancer develop on my skin 2 weeks after both of those. And so I said, never again are we going to have any rallies anywhere close to these plants. So no, I don't just hang around the plants or go on tours or anything. But it's the same kind of scenario. There, I really want to say, Kevin, you're the guy who's really got some muscle here because you're the boots on the ground. You can get people to go to these meetings and hopefully get everybody charged up, because that's what it really comes to. I fortunately am within 50 nautical miles of San Onofre, so I had some standing, but I had to argue with them because I'm not within 50 statute miles. So they said, you're not within the area. And I said, I'm within 50 nautical miles.
Well, there you go. And we got
Greg
a
little bit longer. So I was able to challenge them and got involved in that. And we got it shut down and they not restarted. But it's still an issue about the waste. The waste is never incorporated with any of these, all of this is how much it costs for nuclear power. They leave the waste out. They assume that Yucca Mountain already exists and it's there operating. And then they sue the federal government with routine lawsuits saying, how come we're not taking our waste yet? And so that's always left out. And if you include that, there's no way that they're even close to the chart would be way up past the top. So in terms of the cost. Hey, thanks you guys. It's an honor
listen,
to
stay with
Thanks,
Ray.
I have actually been in Yucca Mountain. I went in with a geologist who showed me visibly where the earthquake fault was running through Yucca Mountain. So, and here we have GREG Palast. I'm glad to connect you with MV Romana, Kevin Camps, and Roger Rappaport, as well as Raymond Lutz. Greg was influential in shutting the Shoreham reactor, and he's a numbers guy. Professor Romana, Kevin, and Roger. And so, Greg, you want to comment on how all this reminds you, or not, of what happened at Shoreham?
Well, yeah, I should also mention that my degree is in nuclear economics. This is my specialty. And before I got into the voting
isn't
stuff,
isn't that a contradiction in terms?
Lack of it.
Like
Well, and so I will give you some numbers, Professor. I just happened to actually calculate yesterday that we do have these mini nukes, as people keep talking about. They're in nuclear submarines. And so I did the calculations yesterday by chance, and it's 60 cents per kilowatt hour in the actual functioning mini nukes, 60 cents per kilowatt hour, which is 10 to 15 times more than wind power, which is 4 to 6 cents. I mean, you're talking 1,000% overpricing. Okay, so that's the number there. The second thing is I was an investigator for the U.S. Justice Department, several attorneys general. I worked for, I worked for several utility commissions analyzing the costs of these plants and who should pay for them. And I got to tell you, if you want to know, number one, you're not going to get these small nukes. Like I say, it's 60 cents a kilowatt hour. Maybe they can cut it in half, but forget it. The Shoreham nuclear plant, which you had mentioned, it was presented for, are you ready? $67 million. Finished cost was $20 billion, and it took 20 years. $20 billion, 20 years. And it only operated for a day, by the way. But when we talk about mini nukes, that's how they started. They started out with something like a 400 megawatt plant. And then they said, oh my God, the cost is going through the roof. Okay, let's make it an 800 kilowatt hour megawatt plant, and we can therefore cut the price in half. Well, that was a disaster. It's putting 2 quarts of milk in a quart container. But understand, I have investigated dozens of nuclear plants, mostly for government agencies, and I have not only, first of all, in America, it's not 90% of the plants are overpriced. In America, every single plant, no exception, has been at least double the cost, and usually 10 times the original promised cost. But the other thing is, I've never yet, in working for Justice Department, found a single honest nuclear utility, because you cannot build the plant safely and honestly. Those are your 2 choices. So, for example, the Shoreham plant, this is typical. It's not unusual. A engineer, I put this evidence in front of a federal court. An engineer named Bob Wiesel had written a report saying that this plant does not meet seismic specifications. It can't withstand an earthquake. It can't withstand a terrorist attack, or even a dump truck backing up against the building, because it wasn't seismically qualified, and all the panels were going to fall off the wall of any shake at all. So the company literally, and I showed them the 2 reports, the company literally took the report that said this plant does not meet seismic qualification. That'd be $1 billion plus fix. And they literally changed it to the plant does meet seismic qualification. And the number of frauds committed, so a federal jury granted us a $4.6 billion verdict. So understand, it's dishonesty, and like you say, you have to, and the only way you get away with this is by buying government, as you've said. So let me throw out 2 names. Truth Social is now Trump's his ex-imitation is actually a subsidiary of a nuclear power company. That's where he's going into. Literally, he's now part of a nuclear power operation. So there. And then, okay, that's the GOP. Well, how about the Democrats? Rahm Emanuel. Rahm Emanuel made his millions in putting together Exelon, the giant nuclear utility combine, through when he was working with Lazard. So that's how Rahm Emanuel made his money. So he becomes mayor of Chicago. And so Barack Obama ran against nuclear power. Rahm Emanuel becomes his chief of staff, And in the Iraq emergency bill, which was to get bulletproof vests for soldiers and rearm the Humvees and all that stuff, they snuck in a $50 billion nuclear plant guarantee. And that's why we're all on the hook for the Vodal nuclear plant. By the way, I investigated Vodal too for the government. I did an audit of Vodal books from the first, there's 4 units. And I was looking at the first 2 units. And it was complete criminal fraud. They were charging for parts that didn't exist. It was, and we're not talking a small amount of money. We're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars. And I was just looking at one set of books. You cannot build a nuclear plant safely and honestly. It can't be done. And if you do, it's 20, 30, 40 billion dollars. And that's just insane when you can, and it's just insane. So it's the amount, it's the cost. Forget the danger. I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm a numbers guy. I can tell you though that the cost is bankrupting.
Well, one thing, Greg is my fellow ratepayer in Southern California, and the one thing that we would really like to see is an accounting of how much money California ratepayers statewide would save if the Diablo Canyon plant was shut and the state converted to renewable energy. So MV Romana, if you can join with GREG PALAST and give us the report that will make that clear, I think we can shut Diablo Canyon. As having spent, I'm slightly biased. I spent 3 lovely nights in the San Luis Obispo County Jail in 1984. I'm happy to go back at any time. But we need the one number we need. How much will electric rates go down if Diablo Canyon is shut, as Gerry Brown laid out the plan in 2018, and how much we will save when California goes 100% renewable, which it could tomorrow. I mean, we are in shape now with batteries, wind, solar, geothermal, wave energy, ocean thermal, all that stuff. If we shut Diablo Canyon and went 100% renewable in California, how much would we save? So if you and Greg can put your mathematical heads together and come up with that report, I think we can win. This has been a spectacular session. What a great brain trust we have. Kevin, Roger, Professor Romana, GREG PALAST, Ray Lutz. Does anybody else want to jump in here? We're almost out of time.
Yeah, can I just
Romana,
jump in one very quick minute just to say, Greg, I completely agree with you. I'm glad you finally did the numbers for these submarine reactors, because I can tell you the number of times when people come and say, oh, we already have all these small reactors, why are you saying it won't work? And so I always say they're going to be much more expensive because these are custom built for submarines. Right? They're not really built to make electricity, because you have to make the submarine go fast and slow and go down. And so they have a whole bunch of requirements on the fuel that a normal reactor won't have. But I never did the numbers, so I'm very glad you did that.
Well, Myra Reeson has a hand. She's also a Southern California ratepayer, and then Mike Hersh, and then we're going to be Professor Romana. I just want to let you know at 4:20 we all go toke up, so that's the end of the call. But Myra Reeson, go ahead from Santa Monica, and then Mike Hersh.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so interesting and kind of devastating. Last week there was a debate among 7 of the top-rated gubernatorial candidates for the state of California. And they were asked a question regarding the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant that's run by the criminal enterprise known as Pacific Gas and Electric. And they were involved in a speed round where they were told that Californians pay 3 times the electricity rates as others in this country. We have the highest in the continental United States. But that Diablo Canyon, which supplies a small fraction of energy for the state, which can easily be replaced by renewables, is scheduled to shut in 2030. And they were all asked in this lightning round, whether they would extend the license beyond 2030. And each one of them said yes, that they would extend the life. And it's just kind of mind-boggling to me that people who are so focused on affordability, which is the new buzzword in politics these days, that they kind of ignored the part of the question that had to do with the cost, and thought that for some reason it would be wise for them to reply that they were in favor of extending the life beyond 2030. Do you have a comment on that?
It is political expediency, right? They've, done their, focus groups and stuff like that. Somebody must have told them this is the answer you need to be giving on this. That would be my guess. It's not that they do any analysis or they have deep commitments, I would imagine, but some of them might have, but yeah, maybe Greg or somebody has a better answer than me.
Well, we need to present the irrefutable study that shows that shutting Diablo Canyon will cut electric rates in California. We know that we have enough battery backup online on the grid now in California to never have another blackout. California is now blackout proof in terms of the grid because of the increase in battery capability in the last 5 years. We need to show Professor Ramana and Roger and Greg, Ray, and Kevin that we have this study, Mila, that we can show that the rates will go down, and then I think we can win. Mike Hersh, and then we're pretty much out of time. Mike,
Yeah,
then Greg, then we'll go to Greg.
Yeah, real super quick. Don't take our word for it. Take Cato Institute's word for it. Nukes are, to call them a white elephant would be a compliment. They are a massive ripoff. So it's like, come for the cancer, stay for the poverty that it imposes on you. And I just want to give a quick hint to my California friends. Inveigh upon your legislators to pass what's called a study bill, where they pay to figure out how much money the state can save by shutting down the nukes, because they love doing that, because it gives them a kind of a hedge. They're not really doing something, but they look like they're doing something. In this case, they're providing you knowledge that you could then use to leverage to shut down. Yeah, so
they'll
go
have
with
to
the study bill.
They'll have to hire Greg Palast and MV Ramana, along with Roger Rappaport and Kevin Camps. And you guys should do this in Michigan too, of course.
Couldn't pick a better team. And I'd have
how much will Michigan save, along with Ray Lutz? How much will Michigan save if they abandon this insanity at Palast?
Amen. And this is the whole thing. It's good money after bad all the way down the line. And Greg, as an economist, can tell us the fallacy of throwing good money after bad. The only people who profit from that are crooks.
Yeah, like PG&E and Gavin Newsom. Greg Palast? Uh-oh. Greg, you're muted.
Greg, you're muted.
There you go. What happened, Greg? We can't hear you.
Oh, there you go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so very quickly, I just looked up a nuclear industry. The nuclear industry itself puts Diablo Canyon's operating cost of 7.6 cents per kilowatt hour, even if you get rid of the sunk cost at the moment. But so it's 7.6 cents per kilowatt hour versus about 5 cents for wind. So it's actually, so you don't have to go you don't have to pay me 200 grand to analyze it. Just look up the industry statement itself. The California Public Utility Commission just gave him $700 million for it. So it's a lot of money. It's not a savings by any means.
In order to get you to do the report, Greg, I'm going to buy you another dinner from the Indian restaurant, and you and MV Ramana will coordinate with Roger and Kevin and Ray Lutz, who's in California. We need a definitive study.
Okay, but you don't need my degree in economics to know that 7 cents is more expensive than 5 cents, and that's what we're paying to keep this thing there. And there is an assumption they've sold this too cheap to meter crap, or it's all going to be really cheap and free, or we're going to take a plant that's already there and we're going to extend it. And obviously that's got, but it's not like resurfacing your patio. It's expensive to extend these plants.
Right.
And they keep, and they're giving, and I think Mila got a good point across, is that they present it like, oh, electricity costs are so high. Are you going to extend the plant's life to save costs? Well, wait a minute. Who said it's saving anything? No one's, where'd that come from? Their propaganda game is so good. And we have to, I really would like us to concentrate on cost, because if it's about safety, and there is a safety question, if it's about cost, that's what people are concerned with right now. And you can win on the cost argument.
Well, if it's so damn safe, why can't they get insurance? But I don't believe that 7.6 cost estimate in any. I think it's more like 70.6, but that's another story. Ray Lutz, and then Steve Caruso, and then we're going to be out of here. So go ahead, Ray.
I'm really suspicious about what's going on with Holtec. You know, they're supposed to be taking care of the waste problem, and they're supposed to be shutting down this plant. And I think they're worried that their whole scam about the waste problem is going to blow up in their face, because there is no consolidated interim storage sites available. There's no real Yucca Mountain. There's no place to put it. And I think they have to store it on site at these various places for some time. And as soon as the public realizes it's not going anywhere, they're going to start, this is going to start blowing up. So by extending it at this plant, then they can, in Michigan, they can kind of avoid that question. That's what I'm thinking of. So keep that in mind. Okay.
Well, I have the perfect place to store the waste, which is Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah.
But, you know,
right.
I think
We always said
bathroom
is absolutely where it belongs. Steve Caruso, and then we're going to have to roll on out. Thank you, Ray. But you need to jump in on this economic study. I don't believe 7.6% per kilowatt hour from Diablo, not for a minute, but we can take a look at it. Steve Caruso, go ahead.
Yeah, the recent article came up linking the Zora Ranch with a software-driven connection to Sandia National Laboratories via Maxwell and the Promise software, where they're apparently feeding information to Israel. So this is back in the day, this whole cabal, raising money, getting, that whole thing is all tied into a nice little bundle there. I put the link in the chat several times, but
okay.
Yeah, that's and then there's also recently they came out with an article about the radiation levels around plants, and all the cancer rates are being recognized around plants now on a regular basis, like their statistics. This involved Joe Mangano.
Right. And Joe Mangano was just with Christy Brinkley and San Luis Obispo.
Right.
So, and the cancer, Joe's been showing for decades the connection between radiation and from nuclear plants and cancer rates, and that's a given. It dates back to John Goffman in 1970. So we know all that's true. And in fact, Teddy Kennedy, the senator, asked that there be a national study by the federal government of cancer rates around nuclear power plants, and they never did it. They would never do it. If Bobby Kennedy really wants to have an impact on national health, he needs to have the definitive study of cancer rates around nuclear plants. It is not a pretty picture, I guarantee you. Mike Hersh, and then we're going to sign off, please.
I just want to say really quickly, for people who wanted to see the slides but are listening to this and aren't on the Zoom, you can catch these Zooms on demand at Grassroots EP, all one word, grassrootsep.org. Visit the website, watch the videos on demand, share them widely so you can share this very important knowledge.
All right, you guys, everybody, another astounding session. We still have 43 people with us, and we're going to go out and toke up at 4:20. Thank you very much. GREG Palast, we look with you and Ray Lutz, and Professor Romana, thanks for joining us. We need that definitive study. I do not for a second believe that Diablo Canyon is producing electricity at 7.6 cents per kilowatt hour. Not even close. Everybody, Myla Reason, great to see you. No nukes, everybody. And we'll see you next week. We're going to revisit, of course, the great electoral train wreck that's underway. Thank you, Alexis.
We have Ro Khanna, Congressman Ro Khanna, joining us next week.
Okay, Ro Khanna, yes, and he will. All you Californians, we need to talk about to the congressman about our electric rates. And Roger Rappaport, your report was great, along with Kevin. You need to do the same. If we get the same per kilowatt hour study in Michigan, maybe they'll come to their senses. All you got to do is tell them that Ohio State is beating them in electric rates, and that'll end it. Okay, everybody. No nukes. We'll see you next week. Thank you, Steve Caruso, for engineering. Myla Reason, Mike Hersh. Another great call, you guys. Take care, everybody. See you in a week.
Thank you. Thanks.